know what they say, that hell is already on Earth. It's just not evenly distributed, and the following cities sure have the bulk of it. Death here is just around the corner. Some places are even on pace to have the highest murder rates not just in America, but in the entire world. In others, you are as likely to get killed as in some failed state in Africa. The US Travel Advisory has a detailed list of countries where you shouldn't go and what might happen to you there. But what it fails to mention is that you can easily face those same dangers within your own borders. Just gotta know where not to look. Don't count on the police if you're here. They're understaffed, underfunded, and spread too thin. Nobody has your back here. You're on your own. So buckle up as I'm taking you through the top 10 most murderous cities in the US in 2023, Part 2. Number 5, Detroit, Michigan. Poor old Detroit, the phantom pain of America, the town that put the world on wheels, the one setting for cyberpunk movies and video games, although I don't see why. The yin and yang of the cyberpunk genre is high-tech and low-life, and in the case of Detroit, it's both low-tech and low-life. The homicide rate here is similar to a poor African country of Lesotho. Last year alone, the city saw a whopping 328 murders, which is more than the whole state of New Jersey, which we discussed in the first video of this series. Since 1967, there were few years when there was less than 300 murders here.
This is going to happen all over America. It's going to be a hot world, not a hot summer.
Basically, since 2012, someone gets murdered here every 24 hours. And it's not even the worst part. Half of all Detroit's murders go unsolved. And on top of that, there are plenty of mass shootings. Last year there were 11, and it wasn't any better than the previous years. But how did it come to all this? Well, it's simple. Back in the 1980s, when the big three automakers outsourced their manufacturing to Asia and Mexico to lower their production costs and compete with cheaper Asian cars, a lot of people lost their jobs here. It triggered a mass exodus of people. And even though Detroit is still depopulating today, back then the flight was truly massive. So now Detroit has no core industry anymore. The wealthy people are long gone, vacant properties don't generate taxes, and all the things that make a city nice cost money, which Detroit has none. But it still has to somehow maintain its infrastructure, social programs, and most importantly, its police force. Needless to say, the police department doesn't have enough resources to cover the whole 138 square miles of Detroit's territory. Look at the map. The city is huge. You can fit San Francisco, Manhattan, and Boston inside of it. And here we have the second consequence. Bad areas are scattered across the whole map in random places. And if you stray far enough south of the 8-mile road, you may end up in one of them without even seeing it coming.
Little Baghdad, that's what we call it. Get that bullet hole on there? This like one of the worst zip codes on the west side.
Gone people left abandoned buildings, which have become magnets for drug trade and everything that comes with it. Poverty, crime, shootings, gangs, and urban decay chronically plague Detroit. Statistically speaking, a typical Detroit household made $61,145 last year, which is not very impressive, but still slightly more than the average income for Michigan, which ranks somewhere in the bottom 20 of all states. I remind you that the current national average is $70,181. Similarly, Detroit's poverty rate of 26.5% is twice higher than the national one of 11%. As for the positive note, the safest place where your chances of catching lead are the lowest is downtown. It is a relatively safe area with a strong police presence. Also, the city invested in renovating downtown, and it has been completely made over in the last decade. It turned from a ghost town into a thriving center with restaurants, breweries, bars, museums, music venues, and so on. Just remember not to stray far away from here, okay? Number 4, Birmingham, Alabama. It is our 4th murder capital of the US. But if you're measuring actual murders per capita, the numbers don't lie. Here in Birmingham, there were 92 murders in 2022 and 89 in 2021. And for a city with just over 200,000 people, that means residents have a 1 in 2,200 chance of being killed every year. And it's 1 homicide every 4 days and more than 2 victims per week. I have a little theory that it runs in the name. There is also a Birmingham over the pond in the United Kingdom, and that British Birmingham is the #1 most dangerous place there. So maybe just rename it into something else and see what happens. But jokes aside, Birmingham City Council admitted that the city has become a, quote, killing field.
So what's going on right now? That's alright, they could turn to Swiss cheese.
Lately in December 2022, 2 high-profile murders took place one after the other. Mayor Randall Woodfin and the city council promised to get serious about gun violence in Birmingham. They came up with a plan and gave it the most boring name ever. 10 practical steps that are needed to curb gun violence in the city. The steps include hiring more police officers and even relocating some of those willing to live near the most violent areas. They also want to introduce some good old Big Brother tools of installing surveillance cams and random checkpoints on the streets. And of course, all of this takes money. But how can you and me reduce our personal risks of getting popped on the street here? Some say that Birmingham as a whole is a dangerous city, period. Others suggest avoiding going west of 65 and you'll be fine. Also, Ensley and Norwood areas are a no-go, and you better stay as far away from them as possible. Nice and dangerous areas in Birmingham are so close to each other that it's easy to accidentally stumble into one if you're not from here. So make sure you always know where you're going and what lies in between. Better walk those extra 500-600 feet staying on the safe side than taking your chances. Number 3. New Orleans, Louisiana. Here in the Big Easy, the police department is overwhelmed as the city is on track to becoming one of the most dangerous cities in the world by murder rate. The number of murders here is rising constantly, from 119 in 2019 to 201 in 2020. In 2021, it reached 218, which is an 83% increase over 2019. And last year, the city saw a sharp increase to a whopping 290 murders. If I gave you these numbers without naming the place, you'd probably think there's a little war going on there. Local people voice different opinions, ranging from hope to despair. The most recent Reddit discussion I could find is 6 years old, and things were much better back then. These people don't even know what's coming at them. Many connect the drastic increase in murder rate with progressive prosecutor Jason Williams, who took over as district attorney in 2021. The new attorney, being under tax fraud investigation himself, promised a quote, more selective approach to prosecutions that goes quote, beyond punishment. Anytime I hear this kind of sweet talk, I want to dig in deeper. And apparently so does the Metropolitan Crime Commission. In their report, they blame Williams' tactics for quote, drastic decline in accountability for violent felony offenders. What is more, Williams' office dismissed 937 of the city's 1,411 violent felony cases during his first months in office. I think that reminds me of...
What about you, Bunny?
Thought I might legalize drugs.
For now, if you have any reason to be in this city, stick to the classic rules. Stay away from bad neighborhoods, travel in groups, be home by 1 a.m., don't look weak, don't smile, try to look like a real man, even if you're not. Number 2, Baltimore, Maryland. Okay, take a deep breath for this one. And here I'm starting to feel how few cities I can actually compare this one to. I mean, in terms of where your chances of seeing the end are higher. Statistically, living in Honduras is safer than here. Luckily for me, it was finally easy to write about a city because of the abundance of recorded criminal information. I even found out that in 2022, January was the deadliest month, Saturday the deadliest day of the week, and 8 p.m. was the deadliest hour. And the Southern Police District saw the most homicides, 58. Moreover, nearly 90% of all homicides recorded this year were gun-related. So as a part-time statistician, I can tell you that if you want to see Baltimore and come out alive, then you gotta schedule your trip for any September morning and try to stay as close to Central Police Department as you can. Jokes aside, Baltimore has a reputation, and it is earned. Last year, 333 people met their end here. The city is now having a peak in violent crimes, and the numbers are the highest since 1993 and are close to an all-time high.
What was it like in 2010 compared to now?
More dangerous than ever right now. Right now.
It's also 8 years in a row that there have been more than 300 murders here. Every Halloween, about 100 people gets killed. A real All Saints' Eve, I guess. Something caught my eye as I looked through interviews with residents. Many compare the city to Chicago, which is on our 10th place with 795 homicides. However, compared to Baltimore, Chicago's a huge million-plus city covering a vast territory. People who are actually familiar with both cities underline that while Chicago itself is firmly segregated so that the bad parts of the city don't mix with the good ones, in Baltimore they seep into each other. Thus, middle-class homes may be just 2 streets away from a dangerous gang-infested area. Also, Baltimore is hard to run and manage. Just look at the list of latest mayors here. The 47th mayor didn't run for re-election, 48th resigned, 49th resigned again. 50th didn't run for re-election in 2016, then 51st and 52nd both resigned, and now they have Brandon Scott. Let's see how long he can take it. Good luck. But the message is clear. There aren't that many people who want this job. Tell me in the comments if you do. Right now, the police department thinks this epidemic of violence is linked to the gun market. They launch one program after another to get those handguns out of circulation, with little success. Lately, they've even considered flying surveillance airplanes over Baltimore. I mean, they've already done it. Military-grade surveillance drones were used to keep watch over Baltimore 2020 George Floyd protests, but according to this article, it's ineffective against regular criminals. Sad, but predictable. I hope they fix this place someday. I'd like to go there myself to check out movie locations from The Wire, although I don't see this happening anytime soon. And number 1, St. Louis, Missouri. The winner takes it all. A city more dangerous than El Salvador. And in case you didn't know, El Salvador has 11 times more murders per capita than the USA. Last year, the city saw more than 190 murders. The year 2020 peaked with 262, and it's a lot for a population of 290,000. You have about a 1 in 1,500 chance of dying in St. Louis every year, and very likely by a handgun. Way back in the early 90s, there were about 200 murders a year here, with an all-time high of 267 in 1993. Since then, the number wiggled up and down, although the macro trend was descending. But in recent years, there's been a surge in crime so huge that the city is witnessing almost the same homicide rate as in the 1990s, but this time with only half the population left, because people have been fleeing in droves all this time. St. Louis is participating in the program called Cure Violence, which resembles Chicago's Ceasefire from the first part of our top 10. The program focuses on young people, trying to help them see peaceful alternatives to violence. However, journalists have doubts about both this program and the police methods of classifying murders. For 2 years, there's been a slight decrease in murder incidents, and every time the city officials said their success was due to effective anti-violence programs and smart use of criminal data. But during these years, the police reclassified more than 36 murders as justifiable homicides, sometimes in apparent violation of FBI guidelines for reporting crimes. Before 2019, there were only 6 reclassification cases. In 2020, the police recounted at least 17 that way. In 2021, the number jumped to at least 22. Last year, it's about 20 again. We can't say for sure if St. Louis police are cooking their books or not, but such a noticeable jump in reclassifying murders into justifiable homicides is generally a red flag. Is there anything positive about the place? Well, the new chief of police, John Hayden, says 2/3 of all the murders and half of all the assaults are concentrated in a triangular area in the northern part of the city. Most of the action happens here, like people fighting over drugs or gang squabbles and so on. Downtown is not safe either, but it can be compared to North St. Louis. Also, the citizens sometimes describe riding the subway through East STL as stepping into the Fallout video game, adding that the 5th and Missouri stop may as well be called Homicide at Knife Point. So avoid these areas at all costs. Never stop walking if someone asks you what time it is or if you have a light, and try not to keep eye contact for too long. So that's it. This video took me more than a week to research and edit, so if you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Also write in the comments what sketchy places have you been to and what happened to you there, and I'll see you in the next video.